Astoria is located in the northwestern corner of New York, in the borough of Queens. For those of us from New York and are familiar with Astoria, the first thing that always comes to mind is Greeks. Astoria was once known as Greektown for its large Greek population. At one time, Steinway and Ditmas Boulevard was replete with Greek social clubs and cafes. In the late 40s, at the age of 14, Spyredon Spiro Valencias immigrated to the United States with his family from Greece. Initially, they settled in Boston, but eventually relocated to Astoria, New York in the 50s. Over time, Spiro owned and operated a Greek social club in Astoria. Back then, the guy in charge of all the Greeks was Pete the Greek Karakos, and Spiro became his driver. Karakos was on record with Christy Tick Funieri, who at the time was a captain in the Lucchese family. As an associate of Christy Tick's, Pete the Greek would pay tribute to the Luccheses from his gambling operation. In the early 80s, when Pete the Greek had passed on, Spiro took his place as the top Greek in Astoria. By that time, Christy Tick moved into a consigliere position, and Vicar Musso and Gaspipe was running his old crew out of his social club, the 19th Hole in Brooklyn. Gaspipe inherited Spiro and handled him for a while, but he assigned that task over to Pete Chiodo, who was a captain in the family. Under Chiodo, Spiro was handing over approximately $10,000 a month to the Luccheses. Besides his successful gambling operation in Queens and Brooklyn, which included horse rooms, dice games, card games, and the Joker poker machine business, he also created legitimate income from construction, restaurants, travel agencies, and a number of stores, and of course, cafes. Spiro was known to be an earner and did very well for himself. Actually, he became very wealthy throughout the years. While I was running around the street in the 80s, I've heard the name Spiro from Astoria, although I didn't know him. As for Spiro being an associate of Chiodo, the benefit in that was, if he ran into any problems, he could bring it to him. Naturally, with the money Spiro was turning in, any problem Spiro had meant problems for the Luccheses. The main objective is to keep that money flow coming. One of the more significant problems Spiro encountered was with the Gambino family. Spiro, as I mentioned, was big in the gambling business. Back then, dice games and card games were opening and closing all the time. In late 1989, Spiro opened a dice game in close proximity to a Gambino Baccarat game. By doing so, the Gambinos felt he was a little too close for comfort and was infringing on their profits. The Gambino family, specifically John Gotti, felt Spiro was encroaching on their area as well. This particular issue came to a head in January of 1990 during a taped conversation at the Ravenite Social Club, where John Gotti is overheard telling Sammy Gravano the following.
You tell this John Gotti, to sever your motherfucking head off.
A sit-down took place over the gambling spot, and Chiodo apologized and told Sammy Gravano that he was unaware that Spiro opened up the spot near their game. This was absolutely not true. Chiodo would make sure he knew every game Spiro operated, so the Luccheses would get a piece of the action. What Chiodo did was, he let him operate, and if no one made a beef, everything was good. But as soon as the Gambinos made noise, he blamed the associate. He's never going to admit he knew, because then the disrespect is on him. Nonetheless, Spiro being his associate, he's still responsible. But by claiming ignorance, he laid the blame on Spiro and away from himself. A typical wise guy move. When a family has an operation in a specific area, unless it's agreed upon otherwise, there's a distance another family needs to respect if they want to open shop in the same vicinity. This doesn't necessarily only apply to illegitimate business. It goes for legitimate business as well. Years ago, there was another Lucchese Gambino beef over bagel stores. It all boils down to who's involved. Some guys might not want to make an issue over it, and some guys will. I mentioned in the preview to this video a beef between the Bananos and the Colombos over cafes in Long Island. I forget which one of them opened a cafe under 2 miles away from a cafe owned by the other family. At the time, Ralphie Di Matteo was telling me about it. I don't know anything more than what I was told, but I remember the cafe in question remained closed for a while. I guess they didn't open it until the outcome of the sit-down was decided. All of the 5 families operate in and around New York without issues for the most part. However, territorial disputes take place every now and then. Before I get into the next person Spiro had a problem with, let me give some background on him first. Sergio Sammy Nalo was a professional thief. In fact, he once was involved in robbing Sophia Loren of $1 million in jewelry while she stayed at a Manhattan hotel. Zsa Zsa Gabor was also robbed, and he may have been involved in that too. Allegedly, Nalo is said to have stolen over $100 million in goods during his lifetime. His biggest score took place on January 2nd, 1972, and made the Guinness Book of Records as the largest and most successful robbery in history, and what became known as the Pierre Hotel robbery. The Pierre, a five-star hotel located on East 61st Street and Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. It's considered a New York City landmark. Many of you will remember the tango scene from the movie Scent of a Woman with Al Pacino. That scene was filmed inside the Pierre. So on that Sunday, January 2nd, the robbery crew exited a limousine and entered the Pierre wearing tuxedos, wigs, and carrying luggage. The crew consisted of 8 thieves, some of who were associated to Christy Tick. It's been said he gave approval for the robbery to take place. He gave strict orders that they were not to kill or hurt anyone during the robbery. The Lucchese's cut was said to be 35% of the take. Once inside the hotel, the crew tied up the security guards, hotel staff, and guests. Next, they opened 50 safety deposit boxes in the hotel's vault. One box contained $500,000 and another $3 million. Overall, they made off approximately between $3 and $20 million in cash and jewelry. The exact amount taken still remains unknown, as they had suitcases full of jewelry. The police who were investigating called it a professional and well-planned robbery. After the score, Nalo tried fencing the stolen goods through Christy Tick and had a disagreement with him over the large cut that Christy Tick expected from the score. Backdoor moves became common amongst the robbery crew, who were all trying to screw each other out of money and jewels. For instance, during the robbery, Nalo pocketed a diamond necklace. He was known as a degenerate gambler and owed a lot of money to loan sharks. Not long after, he was arrested while walking near his Hell's Kitchen apartment. At the time, he was disguised with a wig. I'd like to mention the super thanks icon found underneath this video for anyone who'd like to support this channel. And thank you. Christy Tick had been tipped off from a contact in the police department that they were looking into 2 people for the Pierre robbery, Sammy Nalo and Bobby Comfort. And now both men had been arrested. But they had no evidence or witnesses placing them at the robbery. So instead, they charged them both with possession of stolen property. Comfort had a few emeralds in his pocket when he was arrested. And during a search of Nalo's apartment, they found a few loose diamonds. While in custody, both Nalo and Comfort remained silent about the robbery and told the police nothing. To their luck, Christy Tick had an attorney try to work out a deal for them, but the Manhattan DA wasn't offering either defendant any deals. Subsequently, Christy Tick bailed them both out, and after some time, he even bribed the judge $200,000 to go light on them at sentencing if they were convicted. After a trial and being convicted, that same judge who took the bribe sentenced them to 7.5 years. However, he made sure the case had enough errors to guarantee an appeal. So after appealing, they both only wind up serving 2 years. The problem that Spiro had with Nalo again had to do with his gambling business. This time, in similar fashion to the Gambino's beef with him, he went to Chiodo and complained that Nalo was encroaching on his gambling business. Chiodo knew who Nalo was and supposedly loan sharked him money. Around that time, Nalo was very careful and kept his home address and his whereabouts unknown. But Spiro was able to set up an appointment with him. On October 26, 1988, at 6 p.m., Nalo was meeting Spiro at a travel agency that he owned in Astoria called Olympic. Spiro wasn't there when he arrived, but he spoke with Nalo on the phone. At some point during the conversation, someone came in and shot Nalo. According to records, the police arrived within minutes of the shooting. They found Nalo laying on the floor, but he was still alive. When they asked him what happened, he said he'd been shot 4 times and that he needed an ambulance. At first, he said he didn't know who shot him. When they asked him again what happened, he said he was on the phone with Spiro Valencias, who he was supposed to meet. And then he added, "Spiro done this to me." He told them that the shooter left in a sedan with tinted windows. Nalo kept insisting that he wasn't going to make it, and they asked him again who shot him, to which he replied, "Spiro Valencias." Nalo didn't make it, and he died shortly after. His murder was one of the first of many that Vicar Musso was charged and convicted of. At Amuso's trial, Chiodo testified that Amuso assigned him the role of overseeing an illegal gambling operation, as well as putting Spiro on record with him. He said that Spiro asked that he kill Nalo, and when he brought the situation to Amuso, he wasn't quick to approve the murder, because Spiro wasn't on record with any family, which absolutely makes no sense, since Spiro and his predecessor, Pete the Greek, were both on record with Christy Tick. But according to Chiodo, Amuso eventually gave permission to kill Nalo, and Chiodo assigned the hit to Lucchese's soldiers. Michael Spinelli was picked to be the shooter. In a court transcript, Spinelli admitted to shooting Nalo. Spiro was eventually charged and found guilty for the murder of Nalo. It's always been his belief that Chiodo set him up for the murder. He received a life sentence. So I'm sure in 1992, he didn't lose any sleep when the Lucchese sent the hit team to kill Chiodo and shot him 12 times.